What if a single defense contract, the biggest in Canadian history, quietly rewired the global economy? What if submarines built by a South Korean giant could revive Canada's struggling auto sector, turbocharge the Canadian North, and reduce North America's dependence on American supply chains, all at the same time? That is exactly what is happening right now, and most people haven't heard a word about it. Welcome back. Today we are pulling back the curtain on a story that has been unfolding in Ottawa, Seoul, Kiel, and the shipyards of Gyeoje Island, South Korea. This is a race between two industrial powers to win what could be a $100 billion Canadian naval contract. A competition so intense that both sides are now dangling economic sweeteners worth tens of billions of dollars to win Prime Minister Mark Carney's favor. The number everyone is talking about, $86 billion. That is the GDP boost Germany's shipbuilder ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems is promising Canada if it wins. South Korea's Hanwha Ocean has countered with its own staggering figures: $94 billion in GDP impact, 430,000 jobs, and a secret plan they codenamed Project Beaver. We'll tell you exactly what that is in a moment and why it sent shockwaves through Canada's manufacturing heartland. Stay with us. This is a story about submarines, steel, hydrogen trucks, Arctic sovereignty, and the quiet economic revolution Canada never saw coming. To understand why this deal is such a massive opportunity, you first need to understand Canada's problem. The Royal Canadian Navy currently operates 4 Victoria-class submarines, aging diesel-electric vessels purchased secondhand from the United Kingdom in the late 1990s. These submarines are decades past their optimal service life, and Canada, a nation bordered by 3 oceans including the strategically critical Arctic, desperately needs a modern, capable undersea force. In 2021, Ottawa launched the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project, known as the CPSP, to procure a fleet of up to 12 new diesel-electric submarines. This is not just a defense upgrade. It is a statement about sovereignty, about Arctic presence, and about Canada's ability to police its own waters in an era of rising Chinese and Russian naval activity in the far north. Defense analysts have assessed the total value of this submarine contract at between $60 billion and $120 billion Canadian dollars over the full life cycle of the vessels, including $24 to $30 billion just for the initial acquisition. Prime Minister Mark Carney has said he expects to announce a winner before the end of June 2026, making this one of the most consequential procurement decisions in Canadian peacetime history. 2 bidders remain in the race. Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems, known as TKMS, is offering its Type 212CD submarine, a next-generation vessel developed jointly with Norway. And South Korea's Hanwha Ocean is pitching its KSS-3 submarine, a platform already in service with the Republic of Korea Navy and, as of late May 2026, physically sailing in Canadian waters. Here is what makes this story extraordinary. Prime Minister Carney has signaled that the submarine decision is as much about foreign policy as it is about defense. Canada is actively working to reduce its economic dependence on the United States, a country that has launched a damaging trade war against its northern neighbor. The winner of this submarine contract will become Canada's strategic partner for nearly 70 years. Both bidders understand that this is not just about selling hardware. This is about who gets to shape Canada's economic and industrial future. On March 25, 2026, a South Korean Navy KSS-3 submarine, the Shin Chae-ho, departed Jinhae Naval Base and began a 2-month, 14,000-kilometer voyage across the Pacific Ocean. It made logistical stops in Guam and Hawaii. In Hawaii, 2 Royal Canadian Navy submariners boarded the vessel and sailed with the crew the rest of the way to Victoria, British Columbia. That is not a sales brochure. That is a demonstration. South Korea was not merely submitting a bid on paper, it was proving its capability in Canadian waters in real time. The KSS-3 is a 3,300-ton diesel-electric submarine featuring air-independent propulsion, vertically launched ballistic missiles, advanced sonar systems, and an extended range engineered for long-endurance patrols. Hanwha argues it is uniquely suited for Canada's requirement of maintaining simultaneous patrol capability in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic Oceans. Critically, Hanwha claims it can deliver 4 KSS-3 submarines to fully replace Canada's current Victoria-class fleet before 2035, if a contract is awarded in 2026. The remaining 8 submarines would follow at a rate of 1 per year, completing the full fleet of 12 by 2043. The company argues no competing option comes close to that delivery timeline, and that early retirement of the Victoria class would save Canada approximately $1 billion in maintenance costs. Beyond the hardware, Hanwha has built an extraordinary economic partnership package. An independent analysis completed by KPMG, the global consulting firm, found that Hanwha's bid would represent $60 billion in direct economic opportunities for Canada from 2026 to 2044. It would support an average of 22,500 full-time employees annually and generate $94 billion in GDP impact over the lifetime of the program. South Korea's presidential chief of staff, Kang Hoon-sik, who also serves as special envoy for strategic partnerships, went further during a June 2026 visit to Ontario. Citing the updated KPMG analysis, he said Hanwha's full package could create 430,000 jobs and add $96.3 billion to Canada's economy between 2026 and 2044. Hanwha has already signed 75 memoranda of understanding with Canadian companies to help build Canada's defense industrial base. It has already collaborated with more than 100 Canadian companies and institutions across shipbuilding, defense, automotive, and aerospace sectors. Now we get to the part of this story that nobody saw coming. Buried inside Hanwha's submarine bid was a proposal so unexpected it was kept classified until June 2026. South Korea's team gave it a name, Project Beaver. Here is the background. South Korea originally wanted to bring an electric vehicle manufacturing plant to Canada as part of its industrial cooperation offer. But market conditions, particularly the collapse of EV demand projections and ongoing tariff uncertainty, blocked that plan. The Koreans had to pivot. And when they did, they came up with something more immediately relevant to Canada's needs: hydrogen long-haul freight trucks. Under Project Beaver, South Korea would invest more than 3.1 billion Canadian dollars to build an entirely new hydrogen transport truck manufacturing industry in Canada, beginning production in 2030. The plan includes building dozens of hydrogen fueling stations across the country. Hyundai Motors, which has a defense component and is partnering with Hanwha on the submarine bid, would be central to this initiative. The proposal was submitted as part of Hanwha's formal bid and revealed exclusively in early June 2026 by BNN Bloomberg and CTV News. Kang Hoon-sik confirmed the investment would create 9,000 jobs in Canada, and it is all contingent on South Korea winning the submarine contract. This is a clear strategic carrot aimed directly at Ontario's manufacturing heartland, which has been devastated by U.S. tariffs on the auto sector. But Project Beaver is not the only surprise. Hanwha also announced Project Aero Defense, a joint venture with Canada's Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, announced on April 29, 2026. This initiative would produce 5 Hanwha military platforms in Canada, including the K9 howitzer and the Redback infantry fighting vehicle, using Canadian workers and Canadian materials. The joint venture would have 51% Canadian ownership and a Canadian chief executive. A PMA president, Flavio Volpe, has estimated the combined manufacturing package would create 30,000 jobs, 15,000 direct and 15,000 indirect across the supply chain. And to build those vehicles, Hanwha needs steel. That steel would come from Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Hanwha Ocean has entered into a long-term strategic arrangement with Algoma Steel that could result in submarine components being manufactured in Ontario and could provide Algoma with a conditional $250 million order if Hanwha wins the contract. At a high-profile June 2026 event, South Korea's presidential chief of staff stood shoulder to shoulder with Algoma Steel's CEO, Hanwha's executives, and Canada's auto parts manufacturers, telling Canada's industrial heartland that Seoul, not Washington, is their partner. Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems is not sitting idle. Its Type 212 CD submarine, developed jointly with Norway, is widely regarded as one of the most advanced conventional submarines in the world. The 212CD incorporates hydrogen fuel cell air-independent propulsion, meaning it can remain submerged for weeks without surfacing to recharge. It is quieter, stealthier, and in many respects more technically sophisticated than its South Korean rival. TKMS has made its own extraordinary economic promises. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius personally traveled to Canada and referenced the numbers publicly at CanSec 2026, Canada's largest defense trade show. Information obtained by CBC News showed the combined impact of investments by both the German government and TKMS could deliver an $86 billion boost to Canada's GDP and create over 654,000 job years of employment over the lifetime of the deal. An average of up to 50,000 jobs could be created in Canada over the next 5 years alone. The $86 billion figure is the one that spread across headlines, largely because it was spoken out loud by a G7 defense minister on Canadian soil. But it is important to understand what that number represents. It is TKMS and Germany's projection of the total economic impact of a broad range of investments in shipbuilding, critical minerals, missiles, ports, and energy infrastructure. Many of those investments, Germany says, could be delivered within the first 2 years after a contract award. Germany is also making a geopolitical argument. Choosing a European submarine maker connects Canada's defense posture directly to NATO's industrial base, increasingly important as the alliance navigates Russian aggression in Ukraine and questions about American commitment. A Canadian submarine fleet built in partnership with Germany would be interoperable with European navies from day one. And for a prime minister who has made diversifying away from Washington a central pillar of his foreign policy, Berlin is a powerful alternative anchor. The competition between South Korea and Germany has spilled well beyond submarines and manufacturing. South Korea is making sweeping promises in energy and resources. Kang Hoon-sik confirmed that South Korea is committing to importing 3.4 million tons of LNG annually from Canada, more than 5 times the current amount, and expanding investment in LNG Canada, the massive liquefied natural gas export terminal in Kitimat, British Columbia. South Korea is already Canada's third largest market for crude oil. The country has also committed to purchasing $9 billion worth of Canadian critical minerals, the metals and rare earth elements essential for batteries, semiconductors, defense systems, and the clean energy transition. South Korea is a technology-intensive economy with almost no domestic mineral resources. It genuinely needs what Canada has. This is not charity, this is complementarity. This deal is happening against a backdrop of already deepening bilateral ties. Canada and South Korea have been operating under the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement since 2015. Bilateral merchandise trade reached $25 billion in 2025, making South Korea Canada's 7th largest trading partner. Trade has doubled since the agreement's implementation, with 99% of Canadian exports now eligible for duty-free access. South Korean foreign direct investment in Canada reached $17.6 billion in 2025, making South Korea the 12th largest investor country in Canada. And Hanwha's broader footprint already extends into clean energy. Its Q Energy unit is involved in offshore wind projects in Nova Scotia. Hanwha Ocean is co-developing an LNG project in Newfoundland and Labrador. South Korea is positioning itself not just as a submarine builder, but as a long-term industrial and energy partner for Canada's entire economic future. The Canada-South Korea submarine competition cannot be understood in isolation. It is a direct product of a seismic shift in Canadian strategic thinking triggered by the Trump administration's trade war. U.S. tariffs have hit Canada's auto industry particularly hard, cutting vehicle production by nearly 30%. Ottawa has been urgently seeking ways to diversify and reduce dependence on a single, suddenly unreliable partner, and South Korea knows exactly how this game is played. At the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Gyeongju in late 2025, Seoul concluded a grand bargain with the United States, offering a $350 billion package of industrial investments, including money specifically targeted at American shipbuilding, in exchange for cuts in tariffs on South Korean automobile exports. It was not a standard trade deal. It was masterclass economic statecraft. Canada's policy analysts have taken notice. Ottawa should be doing exactly the same, using its resource wealth, its strategic geography, and its defense procurement power as leverage to secure long-term industrial investment from its partners. There is one more dimension that rarely makes the front pages but sits at the heart of every calculation in Ottawa: the Arctic. Russia has massively expanded its submarine operations in the Arctic. China has been building icebreakers and signaling territorial ambitions in the region. Canada's ability to maintain year-round undersea surveillance in Arctic waters is not an abstract policy goal. It is a concrete, urgent strategic necessity. 12 new submarines delivered on a fast timeline would transform Canada's ability to assert sovereignty over its own territorial waters in the high Arctic. Both Hanwha and TKMS have emphasized their platform's suitability for under-ice operations. Whichever submarine wins this contract will be patrolling the Northwest Passage for the next 50 years. That is not a defense purchase. That is a declaration of national intent. Prime Minister Mark Carney has committed to announcing the winner before the end of June 2026. Both sides have made their final pitches. Cabinet ministers, presidential envoys, and CEOs have toured Canadian steel mills, auto parts plants, and shipyards. Both sides have dispatched their most senior officials to shake hands and sign papers on Canadian soil. The evaluation framework gives 15% of the bid score to economic benefits, including job creation, integration into the defense supply chain, and industrial benefits. The rest is weighted toward technical performance, cost, and strategic fit. But make no mistake, this will not be a simple spreadsheet calculation. It will be a political decision with strategic consequences that outlast any single government. If Canada chooses South Korea's Hanwha Ocean, it locks in a 70-year partnership with Asia's most technologically sophisticated industrial economy. Canada gets submarines delivered faster than any alternative, a hydrogen truck industry in its manufacturing heartland, armored vehicles built with Canadian steel, $94 billion in projected GDP impact, and a dramatically expanded energy and critical minerals trading relationship with one of the world's most dynamic economies. If Canada chooses Germany's TKMS, it deepens its integration with NATO's industrial base and anchors itself more firmly to the European security architecture. It gets what many analysts consider the more technically advanced submarine platform, an $86 billion GDP boost, 50,000 jobs over 5 years, and sends a clear signal to Washington that Canada remains a committed Atlantic Alliance partner, even as it charts a more independent course. Neither choice is wrong. Both represent a fundamental departure from the old assumption that Canada's economic and security future was inextricably tied to the United States. That assumption died somewhere between the first round of Trump tariffs and a South Korean submarine sailing 14,000 kilometers to prove itself in Canadian waters. The world is changing fast, and sometimes the biggest shifts happen not with a bang, but with a procurement announcement buried in the back pages of the defense press. Canada is about to make a decision that will shape its industrial economy, its strategic alliances, its Arctic sovereignty, and its relationship with Asia and Europe for the next half-century. And sitting right at the center of that decision is a competition between two industrial giants, each offering a vision of what Canada could become: $86 billion. 430,000 jobs, hydrogen trucks, Arctic submarines, Algoma Steel, Project Beaver. This is the deal nobody saw coming, and it is about to change everything. If you found this story as remarkable as we did, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. The conversation about Canada's future is just getting started. Thanks for watching.